The story of the Mellon Collection and how it came to the Virginia Museum of Fine Arts is really quite interesting. Paul Mellon and his wife Rachel, also known as Bunny Mellon, collected French and British art throughout the middle to late 20th century. And in the end, it became one of the most significant collections of its kind in the South. It's always interesting to think about what inspired somebody to begin collecting art in the first place. Paul Mellon's father was Andrew Mellon, a very famous industrialist, banker, who was also ambassador to the court of St. James in England. But he was also a very significant and generous art collector who collected old master paintings and gave them to the National Gallery of Art, which he was instrumental in founding. So in a way, Paul Mellon was a kind of a chip off the old block. His first purchase was a George Stubbs painting, the great English equestrian artist. So he loved English art, and that formed the basis and the inspiration of the creation of his collection of British sporting art. He was also a fox hunter and a horse breeder. He lived in horse country in Virginia. So the collection of British sporting art was really a personal statement for him, a reflection of who he was and what he was interested in. And when he met and married Bunny, he married a pure Francophile who was absolutely absorbed in all things relating to French art from the 19th and 20th centuries. Bunny Mellon was also an amateur gardener, a horticulturalist, and she actually was invited to design the rose garden for her friends the Kennedys in the early 1960s. So she was recognized, very skilled at what she did, and her taste in collecting was in some way demonstrative of her taste as a gardener and a horticulturalist. She liked things to be low-key, kind of quiet, and to be perfectly in tune with their surroundings. So some of the still lifes and some of the French landscapes and florals and interiors look particularly understated in a sense, but they're still absolute gems. Their colors are luminous, they glow. And this in some ways is reflective of her passions for everything to be quietly beautiful, quietly perfect in its place. What they collected, though, were not necessarily the large-scale pieces by artists like Degas, Van Gogh, and Monet. They did have those, but they were drawn to more intimate works that spoke to them in a more personal way. So, when they were collecting portraits or images of people, they wanted to have things that would tell you something about the person's inner character. Paul Mellon once said he wanted to be sure he liked these people. They lived together in the rural countryside of Upperville, Virginia. And they loved the countryside. They loved the rolling hills, the mountains, the landscape. So a lot of their work is informed by interest in what they felt Impressionists did particularly well. So I think it's the notion that you collect to parallel or to follow your own passions and your own interests. And at some point you start to think about what will happen to the collection. How can this collection contribute to a larger understanding of the period? So you start to think about what do we not have, and if we are going to give this collection to a museum like the Virginia Museum, what does that museum not have that we might help them fill the gap? So it's that sense of benevolence, that sense of philanthropy, and that sense of doing something for the greater good that draws me to their collection and to their collecting impulse. And that's really something that is the lifeblood of museums, the relationship between the community and its collectors as benefactors.